Welcome to another Thought Leaders series. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Ingrid Filmer. Ingrid, welcome.
Thank you, George.
Very excited to be chatting with you today, Ingrid. Obviously, you're the CEO of Burgess Rawson on the Eastern Seaboard. You're based here in Melbourne. I've gotten to kind of know you over the past sort of 6 months, 12 months, and I just think your business is absolutely fascinating. And from a social garden point of view, this is a little different for us because typically the people we're chatting with are experts in residential. So really excited to have you to kind of come in and bestow some commercial property wisdom on us. But before we get into that, I think you guys have one of the most kind of unique ways of marketing your properties. Perhaps if you could just tell us a little bit about Burgess Rawson and kind of how you help your clients to obviously to transact and and find the right people to buy their properties.
Sure, thank you. So you're right, up and down the Eastern Seaboard, we have offices all across Australia. We started 50 years ago next year, our 50th birthday. But 22 years ago, something changed, which was to start the portfolio auctions.
Yeah.
The portfolio auctions have always been held 8 times a year, but when we merged the Eastern Seaboard, we started a 3-day event.
Yeah.
So since 2021, 3 days every 8 weeks, we bring to the market somewhere between $150 and $300 million worth of property.
Wow. Yeah.
Our September auction's $222 million worth of property. Auction obviously is just one way of selling.
Yep.
What we also do is we combine our EOIs, our expression of interest campaigns, and they close the week after the auction, but we pull it together in one massive portfolio. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing is a couple of things. The first thing is that we bring to the market a set of investments that generally private investors are absolutely seeking. What we find is they're just looking on the internet for property, it can be lost with a lot of other listings.
Yeah.
We have purposely targeted our website, our portfolio magazine, everything we do, down to a very, very set space, which is leased investments under 100 million.
Yeah.
That's where we sit.
Yeah.
And most of our properties will generally have very, very well-known tenants that people feel very comfortable with, long leases, but also we pride ourselves in being extremely transparent in the way that we present these properties.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of confidence in our market, and because we've done it the same way for 22 years, we have buyers who are totally confident turning up and bidding on the day on these assets because they can rely on the information that we've got at hand for them.
Yeah.
And the auctions are very exciting. They've become the litmus test of the entire market.
Yeah.
Nowhere in Australia do you bring 5 to 8 childcares 8 times a year. So if you want to know what childcare is selling for, we're the ones who are going to tell you. There's no other way of knowing what commercial property is doing. So we're setting the market very much. And that's in our 10 key categories. That's from supermarkets to medical to fast food. All of those are being basically set by the Burgess Rawson auction. And because it is an auction transparent process, it means that you know exactly what that asset will sell for today. You can also line up like-for-like assets. So if we've got 5 childcares, you can compare what a 10-year lease is doing versus what a 15-year lease is doing. You can analyse how tenants are being rated by investors, and that gives people absolute clarity around where they want to bid to and the kind of properties that they want to buy.
Love it. And it's fascinating. Like, you must have an amazing team behind you to be able to kind of deliver that volume of, that kind of portfolio approach on a 6-week sprint. I think just to be able to pull that off, obviously you've got great processes and great people kind of behind you. But what I'm interested in is you guys seem to be the only one, I think, with this approach. You said you've been doing it for 22 years now. It seems like you've kind of educated the market on, hey, this is kind of a new way. I imagine for the people in the industry, knowing that you've kind of got this milestone coming every 6 weeks, you're able to kind of, go get a litmus test of the market, as you say. Why do you think it is that the rest of the market's kind of not playing this way? Is it just because execution and it's really hard to pull off, or is it scale? What kind of is it?
It's much harder to pull off than you think.
Yeah.
From the outside, I mean, I had someone once say to me, "Oh, you're the company who turn up and sell properties in a row. It's easy for you. You work one day, 8 times a year." And I just had a giggle to myself and walked away. It is an absolute process.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Machine in the background. The agents at the front, what's happening in the background with our data, our analytics, our use of AI, our use of digital marketing is absolutely unique. And it's not something that can simply be copied. And look, there are, some of our competitors are trying to do these auctions, but it takes an absolute commitment. I mean, one of the key parts of it is that our owners and our vendors know our dates 2 years out.
Yeah.
So we commit to those dates.
Yeah.
We've never missed a date. We auction on that day. The confidence in that gives the market and vendors is a major part of it. And when other agents have tried to, put together these style of events, they've put maybe one, or they've said, maybe coming in September, and it got cancelled, and it doesn't produce that, confidence in the market. And also just sheer volume. Our agents know how to do it. They've been fully trained in it. To get a whole new group of agents to learn how to do what we do, it's extremely difficult. And it can take them away from what they do normally. It's like learning a whole new role. And a lot of agents, don't necessarily need to. They might be selling in a different way. And so, the Burgess Rawson way is very unique.
Well, I think about your capability. It's like you're an events business almost as well as a real estate business, because it's like you've kind of got to put on these rolling events, and that kind of requires the capability to deliver events.
Yeah. And it also comes down to quality. Like we don't let every single property into our auctions.
Totally, yeah.
And again, it's very tempting for an agent to say, I've got a listing, I want to sell it, and not actually sit there and say, this is not the best time to sell it, or this is not the right property for the auction. Having the confidence to say that is also part of how we hold these auctions so well.
Yeah, cool. I think a lot of the people probably listening and tuning into us today know the residential property sector reasonably well. I think, the commercial sector isn't as well understood. Could you just really simply outline from an investor's point of view some of the things that, an investor's looking for when they're assessing commercial property, and maybe some of the key differences, I suppose, when you're looking at commercial as an asset class versus residential property investment?
Obviously, the tax treatment is a massive piece. When we've actually seen a huge shift of residential investors into commercial. So at every auction now, I have at least 3 investors who have sold out of residential and coming into commercial.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And why they're doing that? So a couple of things. Obviously, the changes to the depreciation laws. So in commercial, we can still get full depreciation benefits on the property. Longer term leases, so obviously residential versus commercial leases, my leases will be anywhere from 5 to 15, 12 years, very long term leases. Then also guaranteed increases. So obviously the lease will have a 3% or a CPI increase. You're not going to the market and attempting to negotiate that. Repairs and maintenance, in most leases that are the net leases, most of the repairs and maintenance are paid for by the tenant. And I think as distinct from residential, you get your rent, but you don't know if that month you're then going to cop an expense for a heater or a smoke detector or an exhaust fan or something, one of those kind of events.
Yeah.
That doesn't really happen in commercial. So commercial, I think, as compared to residential, is more set and forget.
Yeah.
The other aspect is usually it has much higher returns.
Yep.
So if we're selling properties for 5 and 6% net return, as distinct from maybe getting a 3 or 2.5%. Now, the first thing everyone says to me though is that residential goes up in capital value faster.
Yep.
I absolutely dispute that.
Yeah.
I think that depends on the type of commercial that you're purchasing, and we have hundreds of case studies where we can show that commercial properties have doubled and tripled over time. We've sold properties 2 and 3 times, and we've been able to actually track that. So we sold Hungry Jack's Wangaratta 3 times.
Wow.
We tracked the growth of that property and the profit that property made. It outstripped any of the residential returns. It outstripped the share market. It even outstripped Hungry Jack's as a growth business. So certainly commercial property does have capital improvement, but a lot of people think, well, if it's just the same rent, where's the capital improvement? So that happens in a couple of ways. One, there's often an ability to renegotiate with a tenant. You could contribute to fit out. You could restrike the lease. You could look to add term to the lease. The other way can be through market reviews and understanding where the rent should sit and how it sits. And so there's many different ways. And then, of course, as well, there's actually been a contraction of yields on residential, which has held during the 13 interest rate increases. That's been really interesting. So, for example, fast food at the commencement of the interest rate increases sat at between 4 and 4.25%. And last auction, our fast food is still sitting between 4.25%. In fact, McDonald's sells for even sharper. They're selling for 3% and lower.
Why do you think that is?
The tenant 100%.
Yeah, okay.
Large underlying land holding. The McDonald's that we sold we sold 2 for 3.25%, 1 for 2.97%. all of those were land leases. So in that situation, McDonald's looks after absolutely everything.
Yep.
And they're 20-year leases. I mean, they're akin to a bond.
Yeah.
But you're getting much better. You're able to leverage them. So the other aspect of this is that whilst it's not as much leveraging as the residential market, it's far greater than the share market.
Totally.
So if you went to margin loan on a share, you might be getting 40% LVR.
Yeah.
We've seen also in the last couple of months that the banks have actually increased LVRs on commercials. So commercial LVRs can sit anywhere between 55 and 70%.
Yeah, okay. Well, up to 70%.
Yeah, so that's a huge, depending on the tenant and the location and the lease, that makes a huge difference. So the ability to leverage and put less money in. Then also add to that, there's been a lot of tax incentives. So, for example, in South Australia, you don't pay stamp duty. And that makes a massive difference to the underlying financial performance of the property.
Yeah, wow. And in terms of the market, obviously, you've referenced some of the things in terms of interest rates, and obviously it's a pretty challenging residential market for investors right now. How does the commercial market, does it follow the residential market? Like, what does the commercial market, what I guess are the biggest impacting factors? I'm sure it's interest rates. I'm sure there's other things as well. And how is it kind of different to the residential market cycle?
Well, I think it's extremely different. I mean, the residential market so ultimately is emotion based. Properties are being purchased based on someone falling in love with the property or having a family need. It's not driven in the same way. Commercial is much more driven by economic factors, lack of land, tenant demand, and it's less played with. I think one of the issues that residential is facing is that the government loves to constantly comment on residential ownership and make landlords into the bad guy. And they've somewhat ignored the commercial landlord to a degree. I mean, they've put up our land tax ridiculously in Victoria. But in residential, every day there will be an article where the Greens want to stop rent increases or they want to push more onto the land, or they want to start a tenant tribunal where they can fine landlords on the spot. The residential market, I think, has been really, really affected by the government approach, which I think has been so uncertain, and best to see that as risky. Commercial is not seen that way. Commercial is about big business, needing spaces, needing locations. You're selling a space the way that they're selling a product. And in some ways you're invested with the tenant because their success in that space is your rent and your growth. So it's driven by far more economic factors. However, it generally doesn't move in line with the share market. So where the share market is booming, there's often seen that's where you can go and receive greater returns, and sometimes that will result in lower commercial market. But since COVID, there's been an absolute return to bricks and mortar.
Totally.
People, I think, want to see, touch and feel what it is that they're owning. And so in commercial, you've removed some of that uncertainty that governments and legislation are bringing around residential and also around planning, etc. And then as compared to the share market, you can touch, see, feel, your tenant. You've grown up with these brands. We did a nostalgic portfolio magazine last month.
Oh, really cool.
And it was all about the old ads. And we're talking about, when we're selling Hungry Jacks and KFCs who've been around for 20, 30, they're our childhood food.
Yeah, totally.
So we trust in that. We know that. And these tenants are doing their research. These tenants are using AI, technology. I mean, if you've read the story about Domino's and the way that they're now locating their places, they're at the peak of their AI journey. I mean, they're more of a digital company than they possibly are a pizza company. And so as a landlord, you're going to trust in them picking your site. If they've decided that they're going to go into that location, there is so much work that's gone into that. As distinct
Never really thought about that in terms of the kind of tenant leading the analysis in terms of the location for them to find.
It's not by chance that Domino's, KFC, Hungry Jacks, we might just locate there. They have done so much work into that location, and you're kind of benefiting from that as a purchaser of commercial investment. Whereas with residential, the other thing with residential obviously is that, if you're looking at an apartment, there might be 20 of the same apartment. So how do you compete for a tenant?
Totally.
How do you compete in that market? How do you divest that investment more quickly? Our average days on market is 34 days on market for our properties.
That must be quite unique to Burgess Rawson, I would have thought, though, given the way you sell the properties.
Yes.
Yeah.
So our competitors are 47 days on market under auction, or 109 on EOI. So yes, we do have a system that allows us to bring properties to market and divest them more quickly than other agencies.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the news cycle. Like, I'd never really thought about that. I mean, like, obviously the tie between housing affordability and immigration at the moment is so topical. And as you say, it kind of gets caught up in the whirlwind, the residential market and the investor, and, you know, everyone's kind of looking at someone to point the finger at, whereas that doesn't really exist kind of within the commercial space. I hadn't really thought about that.
I find what they're doing to residential landlords shocking, to be honest, because at the end of the day, the government can't supply housing. You need private landlords to supply housing. They are actually doing the economy a huge service. And every day to kind of be waking up to a new potential legislation or a possible rent cap or a possible change, I think is actually doing a disservice to those landlords who are providing a key part of our economy.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned before in terms of you guys are focused on $100 million. I know you guys play across a whole bunch of different market segments. You've mentioned childcare, you've mentioned fast food. In terms of from a segmentation point of view, is there sort of like a bulletproof asset? Is there, what's kind of your go-to when it comes to like assets across the broader market within the kind of commercial space that you're attracted to?
Look, I'm attracted to a wide range of assets, but what I'm always looking for is, you know, a quality tenant, a quality lease, good underlying land holding. So they're the aspects I'm looking for. Where are you going to find those right now? Well, I suppose it depends on your price point. Yep. So if you're trying to stay under $5 million, then you're going to find some really great medical, some really great fast food and childcare. If you're moving up in that bracket, you could be then looking at a supermarket or a large format style investment. So you might be looking at, you know, Good Guys or a Bunnings or things like that. So it depends. I suppose part of it depends on your price range. What I like about childcare and I like about fast food and medical. So with medical, for example, we've sold a number of things like dentists and pathology. They actually require really substantial fit outs. Yeah, right. And that makes them sticky. Yeah. And it means that they can't easily relocate. It means that they really are there for the long term. So that's a big part of it. That's really interesting, yeah. The other thing I like about fast food right now is that the cost of a warm shell to build, to replace that property, has more than doubled since COVID. Okay. Yeah. And so some of these properties are selling for actually less than land plus replacement cost, because simply the cost of building has gone up so substantially. So there's a number of properties, and in childcare as well, you couldn't replace them for what you are buying the land and the property for. And you're getting a 15-year lease to someone like G8, you know, an ASX listed childcare operator. Yeah. The other great thing about those ASX listed tenants is you can go and investigate what they're doing. You know the health of their business. You know the performance of their business. And that also, whereas with a residential tenant or even with a stock, you might not know that information. Yeah. You can look at those key fundamentals quite easily. And I think that's a key part of the commercial market as well. Yeah. There's transparency to that. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's really... Like, you've obviously been in this business for, 20 years now, I think coming up to 20 years. Yeah. I feel like the market's changed a lot. We've been through COVID recently. I mean, you guys already have, a very unique business model that's unique to Burgess Rawson. What are some of the things you've kind of observed over the past 5 years in particular, some of the changes in the way people engage and kind of buy commercial property, and some of the things you think where the kind of industry's heading towards, and I guess how technology is going to kind of play a role in the changes that we're seeing as well? So obviously one of the biggest things that's affecting the industry is the transference of private wealth. Yeah. So I was looking at, there's billions of dollars going to transfer. So I think that something that's going to affect the industry is that our core client will change. They're going to become substantially younger as children inherit these properties or this wealth. But what I've seen in the industry certainly is a real change in client. Yep. So, yes, I've been at Burgess Rawson 20 years, and when I first started, the people buying the property were really the very, very wealthy of Melbourne. Yep. I would be in that auction room and you were dealing with well-known family names. Okay. What I'm now seeing is an absolute full range of people walking into our room, and a lot of them might have had a very successful business, and they've been able to use that. They're using that money to transfer it into commercial property and to lock that money away safely for children. So I've seen certainly a change in our demographic of client, and I've also seen certainly a much wider range of people coming into our properties. All of those properties are going to transfer in what will be the greatest change in private wealth in Australia in the next 20 years as our baby boomers retire. And so the children of that changed demographic are going to be the ones who we need to educate around what the assets are, what the property is. And these children are being served up on Instagram and social media, fintech advice about buying Bitcoin, right? So we're going to have to change. We're going to have to how do we cut through with boring old property?
Yeah.
Cut through to this next generation who've inherited a substantial portfolio, a substantial amount of money, and help them to understand why commercial property should play a major role in that investment strategy.
Yeah, and so does that mean you're focusing more so on creating education-based content? I feel like, again, with the capability you've got in the business, being able to have these create these amazing events, I suppose, then becomes the idea, I guess, where you can start to leverage that capability to have educational events. Is that something you guys already do? Is that kind of part of the fabric of what you do at Burgess Rawson?
Very much so. So we probably 4 or 5 years ago, we actually had a real focus and we said we want to be thought leaders.
Yep.
We don't want to, you might call it commission breath.
Yep.
We don't want to have commission breath. It's an industry name, but we actually want to be thought leaders. So we actually want to be able to show our clientele and anybody who wants to listen and read information about our different sectors and have that information fully available, but also have it absolutely at the top of market. So we collect all of our data. We use all of that information. We produce industry reports that are freely available. We do thought leadership pieces in our magazine every time our auction comes to portfolio. We also run lunches with partners. So Macquarie Bank, for example, have been wonderful in running lunches, even to talk to people about how they view LVR and how they view an asset. So yes, we're very much about educating the next level because we see that we're part of the overall wealth journey. So, we talk about creating wealth. We think we're part of the toolkit that an investor has. So they might have their lawyer, their accountant, and then they'll have their agent. So we see ourselves as part of that toolkit and sitting in that toolkit. And that's how we treat our clients, and that's how we educate our own clients.
I feel like, obviously listening to you, you're super engaged and, passionate about not just the business, but the industry as a whole. I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on, what is it that kind of gets you out of bed in the morning? What's kind of your purpose? Because I feel like, of all the people we talk to, we talk to some amazing industry people kind of coming and speaking with us. I can just kind of feel the energy, and I've felt that whenever I've spoken to you about kind of the industry and the market. So kind of what is it, and where does that kind of come from, the passion for property and kind of the passion for growing a business and doing something different?
Well, I love problem solving, I love negotiating, and I love bringing people together. So commercial property gives me all of those things.
Yeah.
I'm very, very lucky. Every day I get to work with the most awesome people. Yeah. I absolutely love the people that I work with. And then I work with these clients and, in the last week I've been out pitching for the October auction and I'm meeting the most beautiful people and they are trusting you with some of their biggest assets. It might be a real life wealth event for them when they allow you to divest their asset. And so working with them and showing them, not just saying give me a property sale, but actually talking through the underlying values of those properties and how we're going to treat it and what we're going to do. And I treat my properties as my own. Yeah. The guys were joking in the office because I always call my supermarket girls. All my supermarkets are girls. I don't know why, but all my supermarkets are girls. And I was talking about pitching on a supermarket and I was going, she does this and she's doing this turnover and she's doing this. And they're like, Ingrid.
It's a supermarket.
It's a supermarket. But to me, they're living beings because in commercial property, the space that you supply is key to the success of that business. It's a core component of the tenant's success. It's a core component of the landlord's success. It's a core component of the economy. I mean, commercial property in taxes, employment, generates so much for our industry and our economy. It's precious. And so I wake up every day and I find it exciting. Yeah. Who am I going to meet today? What's today going to pan out like? It's just, it absolutely invigorates me.
Yeah, well, I love it. And as I said, I can feel it when we're kind of talking. So we love the energy. For those kind of listening into this, they want to come along and kind of maybe learn about what you do. Can anyone register and come to the auctions? Is that and kind of where do people go, I guess, to kind of learn more and download some of the content? Is it your website? What's the best way to kind of start to learn more about what it is that you guys are doing?
Certainly our website. We've
Yep.
been loading all of our thought leadership pieces onto our website.
Awesome.
You can subscribe to our magazine and receive a copy every month. You can come along to the auctions. If you want to bid on a property, you do need to register.
Yep.
And our auctions, because they're in each state, you can go to the Opera House in Sydney on the
wonderful.
Tuesday. You can go to Crown Casino on the Wednesday,
cool.
or the Hilton in Brisbane on the Thursday. So great locations. You have a
Yeah.
lovely lunch afterwards. I have been known to run contracts down to Nobu.
I love that.
But certainly you can come along and watch the auctions. You can also watch them online. Last
Cool.
portfolio, we had 3,000 people around the world
Wow.
watch our auction online.
Yeah.
But all of our agents are available, even just to chat about different aspects. We've got a lot of people who turn up and just want to talk about the fundamentals of fast food or the fundamentals of childcare. I've watched over so many years, I've watched so many investors come to maybe 4 or 5 auctions, had a chat, and then finally they come and they buy that first property, and you share in that excitement with them. But often it's a learning. Ultimately, the auctions are a transparent litmus test in the market. You want to know whatever's going on, it's happening at a Burgess Rawson auction. So it's a great education piece just to even watch what the market is doing.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, we release a whole heap of research around it and data. So, you can subscribe to that through our website. The other thing we've done on our website, we've just relaunched our website and we've redesigned it around categories. So again, if you're on one of the standard portals, you can only search by retail, for example. On our website, you can actually search, I want to know all the fast food property for sale, or I want to know supermarkets. So you can actually delve into a certain bracket, or you can also go by price. So, you can look within your price range and really immediately cut down to the properties that are going to suit your needs.
Cool. Well, anyone listening, I highly recommend you kind of come along, get down to one of the events, register. I'm sure it's a lot of fun, but also extremely informative in terms of what's happening in the market, and just a cool experience to kind of see how this market really works. Ingrid, it's been wonderful chatting with you today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, George. I really loved it. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Cheers.